Hi, I'm Martin Kelly of Friends Journal, and this is another Quaker author chat. And with me today is Michael Levy. Hi, welcome, Michael.
Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you. Michael Levy is a member of Adelphi, Maryland meeting. Michael's leading is to help provide a framework in which the guidance of the Spirit can resonate and be better understood so that we all emerge better equipped to answer that of God. And in this issue, in the August issue, you have an article, White Supremacy Culture in My Clerking. So, Michael, let's just start with definitions. So, what is white supremacy? I know friends have been talking about it a lot in recent years, but I'm sure there's still people who are like, white supremacy. I'm not dressing in white robes and burning crosses and all that. So, uh, explain what white supremacy is in this context.
So, white supremacy would be the ideology that all things white are better than all things not white. I mean, I think that's kind of the simplest way of putting it. Yeah, we do think of white robes and burning crosses and things of that nature, which is a very explicit kind of expression of
Mhm.
white supremacy. But I believe it is impossible to escape that ideology growing up or even spending substantial amounts of time in the United States. It's really kind of baked into everything. And so this is kind of where the difference between white supremacy and white supremacy culture come in.
Okay.
So white supremacy is kind of the ideology. White supremacy culture is the fact that most or every major institution in this country has been created, shaped, developed by white people who carry their prejudices with them. I mean, this is not only white black, it's straight LGBTQ, there's age issues. I mean, there's any number of ways in which kind of social ideology translates into institutions. But, we're talking here about race primarily. Looking at the Religious Society Friends as a good example here, our faith very much promotes the equality. We are all ministers.
Mhm.
We Every single one of us has a direct channel to the divine. And whether it's in worship or business meeting or any other context, we go into kind of interactions with one another, knowing that at any moment the person we're speaking with could be channeling the spirit, could be kind of giving a message that the spirit inspired them to give.
Mhm.
So I think consciously we spend, real time, real effort trying to accomplish that.
Right.
Sometimes better, sometimes worse. In different times of our history, there's been kind of more hierarchy, less hierarchy, but we really work at that as a religious community. But since the Religious Society of Friends was founded by white people, white colonists, and has been primarily white throughout our history, throughout the last 350 years, we bring with us ways of thinking, ways of perceiving events, ways of expressing our leadings that are heavily influenced by that white supremacy ideology that we carry with us. And so that's the culture piece of it. It's
Mhm.
that if we if we white people do nothing, we are acquiescing to white supremacy culture just because it's baked in everywhere.
Well, and it's sort of
So
unconscious, I guess.
it
It's
is
we don't even realize what we don't realize, and it's
exactly,
if we're not being conscious and working at it, we're missing something.
exactly.
Yeah.
It's in my life, the best parallel is the women's movement. which kind of was coming to the fore when I was a teenager and early adult. And it also required me to look at my assumptions and look at the world around me and make deliberate efforts to change who I was and how I interacted with institutions, and ideally to change those institutions. And, it's a work in progress, but I think if you look at the last 50 years, enormous strides have been made.
Right.
And so this actually feels kind of familiar to me in that, I've done it before.
Hmm.
Time to
You
do
know,
it
it can
again.
be done.
Whether it can ever be finished, I don't know.
White supremacy and white supremacy culture has been talked a lot about among friends. But what I appreciate is that your article, you're focusing on one part of Quaker culture, and that is clerking. So there might be some non-Quakers here. The clerk is the person who basically runs the meetings, helps sets the agenda, works with a recording clerk usually to write the minutes up. So it's a very specific process. And you talk about in the article about being a clerk of a friend's school board. So tell me what can go wrong in such a circumstance.
Um, it turns out many things. I have, so all of this started um, kind of in a debriefing session at the end of a school year when the existing board, some people were leaving, other people would be joining the next school year. And one of the Black board, I had been serving as clerk of the board, and one of the Black board members said, Michael, when you call for silence during a conversation, I feel silenced. I
Yeah.
feel like I've been shut down. Um, and, my initial reaction was, well, that's actually a completely the reverse of my intent. My
Or that
intent
defensiveness, yeah, is
is
totally
to is
normal. Yeah.
to let people sit with a message that I thought was particularly important, and I didn't want the conversation to just flow on afterwards. I really wanted folks to concentrate on what we had just heard, and it landed exactly the opposite.
Right.
And so, at first it was like, this is a misunderstanding. I can communicate, I can express myself better, maybe better training at the beginning of the year would be useful. And I kind of held that view for about a year and a half after the incident, but it kept coming back I kept remembering it. It kept nagging at me,
Right.
and just this feeling that I'm missing something here. It's not as simple as I thought. But I pretty successfully pushed that aside for about a year and a half until this past winter. Um, and then I started thinking more deeply about it and thought, well, I mean, first of all, my intent doesn't actually matter. If I'm making people feel like they've been shut down, like they've been censored, like I'm suppressing them, then I need to change it regardless of what my intent is. Because my objective is to bring all voices and all expressions of the divine to the table, so we can make spirit-led decisions. And then I like to read mystery stories.
Oh,
It was very much like a mystery story to me. Um, I would kind of unpick one strand, one thread, and I'd try and follow it. And I'd find some other evidence that led me a little and so I kind of kept following these threads, kept following these themes that I was beginning to uncover in the way I act as clerk. It spread a lot deeper than I'd expected it to begin with.
one thing I'm wondering is how do you handle, and I don't know if this would be the Friend School Board, but in normal times, there are times where you're in a meeting and there's someone who's being disruptive or the whole place is just sort of going crazy. How do you deal then with calling to silence without silencing people, even though you are still silencing people, but for a greater cause? So how do you discern within your head?
Right.
Is there a way out of that knot?
I mean, I think there is. Um, and I should say, when I was writing it, I was not thinking exclusively of the school board. I've also served as clerk of the meeting and of
Sure.
committees. So I was kind of thinking more broadly. One of the things I talk about a little bit is race aside. Um, there are many times in a meeting for business when someone says something that's really important, but not necessarily on topic.
Mhm.
Um, and I think every clerk ends up having a lot of experience, trying to discern in the moment, is this worth the detour or not? Because part of the job of a clerk, of course, is to end the meeting more or less on time, which means getting through, the business.
Sure. Ask the
Um,
respect of the participants who may have other things to go to. You don't want the wait to go to whoever has nothing to do that day and can stay around the longest. You want to be able to have everyone participate.
exactly. Plus which after a certain period of time, everybody's energy fades
Mhm.
enormously. So, one of the jobs is to keep the meeting on track. And so, like I say, I think anyone who's ever served as clerk has the experience of, do we go with something important that will take time and not lead to a kind of a conclusion of this agenda item? Or do we put that aside and continue with the agenda as stated? So, that's commonplace. Where it's much harder for me is when harm is involved. I have much less experience with that. The way we're talking about this hurts, friends. Kind of how to react to that. When it's kind of cerebral, I'm good. The more emotional it gets, the more tense I get. I'm pretty sure that my upbringing has something to do with that. I am the product of a middle class white family. Decorum, politeness. I was the son of a university professor, so kind of the intellectual approach to life's problems is what I was trained, is the approach I was trained to take.
Mhm.
There are families I know because some of my friends, where people yell at each other and there's a lot of emotion on the table, and then it's over and it's over. My family was not like that.
We're all human and we're all bringing our own backgrounds and our own cultures too. Not just white culture, but whatever our family background culture is, the type of family we grew up in. And I don't think we really can divorce ourselves from that. And the problems you might face is not having or having too much of an intellectual liking, maybe quite the opposite of someone who did come up from a more emotionally effusive family. They might have other problems as a clerk.
I think that's another big piece of this is we Quakers tend to look to the clerk as the person in charge, and kind of cede some of our authority to that person. And that's not always a good thing. Because, as you say, we are all human. A single individual sitting in front of the room is going to have personal issues they bring with them, moments of confusion, all the kind of things that human beings are prone to. And I think the more we can empower everyone in the room to actively be paying attention to interpersonal dynamics
Mhm.
and feel empowered to bring them to the group's attention, um, without the clerk potentially even noticing, the better off we're going to be. One difference between the board of a school and a meeting is that at least the monthly meeting I attend is fairly large. And so we have the luxury of things like a clerk support committee. And so, every presiding clerk of the meeting has a group of 4 to 6 people who meet with them regularly and kind of process what happened. I think kind of adding a little accountability component to that, you know, who might have felt marginalized, and how did we respond to it? Just as an ongoing conversation, I think would be extremely valuable. At my monthly meeting, actually, we have had a couple of incidents in the last year and a half, where a meeting member felt very hurt by something that had taken place either during worship or during business meeting. And the meeting stepped up, and really did help process it, both with the individual, but also as a community. And so, you know, we 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 our meeting, we Quakers do come through from time to time, and we just need to do more of it and just kind of remember it ended up so much better than anyone would have imagined. That it's worth kind of stepping into what feels really scary, because the evidence is that you come out the other side stronger, tighter, um, feeling much better about each other.
Great. Well, that's a great note to end up on. Thank you, Michael, for being aware and for continuing to look at that nagging issue at the back of your head that there was something more to the situation, and for writing it for all of us.
Thank you, Martin. This was so much fun.
Yeah,
I enjoyed it a lot.
great. Well, bye bye.
All right, take care. Bye bye.